Reviewing the specs of the S5 II, I really thought this would be the camera that could carry me places, and it did. The S9 kinda was introduced to my setup as a more lightweight, everyday camera, but it became my primary camera actually. Lumix S9, it almost feels like a partner that you can trust, that you can grow with.
In this episode of the Lumix Creators Podcast, I'm sitting down with Sophie, who is a talented filmmaker and real estate videographer on the platform. She has used a multitude of different cameras from the Lumix S5 II, Fujifilm, and the Lumix S9 for both professional and personal use. But in this episode, we're going to be deep diving into why she's actually gravitating more and more towards the Lumix S9, even though she has more professional cameras like the Lumix S5 II and so on. So without further ado, Sophie.
Hi Matt, how are you going?
I'm doing good. So just a brief introduction that I gave to my audience. Can you just give my audience a little bit more context on who you are, what you do, and all that fun stuff? Because I know you also do some things on Instagram and different things like that as well.
Absolutely. So I've actually started my filmmaking videography journey coming from the photography side. I've always been into photography. I've experimented with all of the different kinds of from portraits to I've even been doing equestrian photography for some time. So shooting with horses, horse competitions and stuff like that. That's been really exciting. But a couple years ago, I actually got into real estate photography as a niche. And that kind of pushed me to grow into videography and content creation in general. I've always been drawn to video a little bit, but not professionally. And I didn't know how to make it a full-time thing and a career. And do it more consistently. But through that real estate photography actually niche, that really opened the doorway for me for video content creation in general. So right now I'm doing a whole mix of things, honestly. Anything from real estate photography and videography to doing more of social content creation for real estate agents and other professionals in the area to also doing a little bit of travel photography, videography, and I've tried expanding into YouTube as well and vlogging my personal life more, not only just doing content for my clients, but also documenting my life and creating content for myself. So that's where I kind of stand right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like once you get started in the industry, and it sounds like you might be just getting more started right now into the real estate, and now it's you can dip your toes into other areas and figure out where your niche is and where your lane is. It's definitely a journey, to say the least, on how you can get stretched in so many different ways. But before we're kind of getting more into the full episode talking about real estate using the S9, I am curious to hear, these are just the warm-up questions I like asking all my guests when they're first introduced to my audience and my brand. What was that first Lumix camera you've ever owned, and what was that introduction to the brand as a whole?
Actually, Lumix S5 II is the first Lumix camera I've ever owned, and I remember very vividly I bought it because I saw Chris Howe video, something about comparing Sony to Lumix and him switching to Lumix. And at that time I was shooting videos on my Fuji X-H1, I think. And although that's a little bit more video-centered camera from Fuji lineup, the autofocus sucked so bad, and I was trying to do YouTube videos for these clients, and the camera just couldn't keep up. So I was looking for a good, reliable video camera that's gonna make video creation easy for me without me knowing much about the whole filmmaking stuff. And reviewing the specs of the S5 II, I really thought this would be the camera that could carry me places, and it did. I got it. It was a bit of a learning curve coming from Fuji to Lumix and from a photo-centered camera to a video-centered camera, but it allowed me to really... That's actually what I really love about all of the Lumix cameras. They allow you to start small and start shooting videos even when you don't know much about all of the settings and videography in general, and just start making content. And as you grow and as you learn more in-depth settings of your camera and doing all of the really cool stuff with the video, the camera really supports you and allows you to go deeper.
Yeah, no, for sure. I always say that Lumix cameras are cameras you can kind of grow into, if that makes sense. It's like you might not need all the crazy specs. Like you're not going to need to be shooting ProRes. You're not going to be needing to shoot ProRes RAW externally and all of that. But kind of the follow-up to this question is, what is your current camera setup and what is your current favorite lens that you're using right now?
That's an interesting question, especially about the lenses. So I currently use only two cameras, the S5 II and the S9. The S9 kind of was introduced to my setup as a more lightweight everyday camera, but it became my primary camera actually. And the fun thing is, I even went on a 5-month road trip and I only took my S9 with me. I left my S5 II at home. And out of the lenses, I really love the tiny 18 to 40 millimeter lens on the S9. That pairing is just out of this world. But I also really love the 35 millimeter 1.8. Anything like portrait centric, that lens is so good.
I might have a new potential favorite lens that I've been playing testing with right now. This is the I'll show my camera and then I'll show you. This is the TT Artisan 40 mil f2 with autofocus.
Ooh, I heard about it.
Yeah, it is like it's
it?
smaller. It's smaller than it's great. It's smaller than the 18 to 40.
That's crazy.
And it has autofocus. It's not obviously as like quick as the prime lenses from Lumix, just because it's a third-party lens. It is funny that your journey to Lumix was the S5 Mark II, so you don't even know the contrast-based autofocus world that Lumix has suffered with, because Lumix was known for the longest time to have some of the best cameras with the best specs, the best color, the best IBIS, but the worst autofocus, and like it was so unusable. It was like you had to like dial it in. And now in comparison with Face Detect, it's a massive change. But the 18 to 40, I love that lens on specifically with this one because of how tiny it is. But now this is, I think the 40 mil f2 from TT Artisan might be my new current go-to with the S9 as like a travel lens. Granted, no zoom, but
that's
it's
true,
an F2,
yeah, and no wide
and
angle.
it's right. There's no wide angle, but it kind of forces you to like put yourself in a box.
That's
so kind
true.
of pivoting a little bit on getting into real estate. How did you first get into real estate content creation for your clients, and kind of what was that typical workflow look like for you, or what does the typical workflow for you on a shoot day?
Okay, so real estate field in general entails a lot of different possibilities in terms of like scenarios you're putting yourself into. And my workflow also evolved with the type of content I was drawn to doing, and kind of I'm always evolving and changing, not my niche in particular, but I'm changing my workflows and the stuff that I'm offering to my clients all the time, just depending on what my soul feels better doing. But I've originally gotten into real estate from the photography side because one of my passions is architecture and like beautiful spaces. I actually studied architecture in college. I thought I was going to be an architect, but here we are.
Great
Much
use
better.
of the degree right now.
Right. And I was exploring kind of what other things I could do with photography that would bring me closer to the things I'm passionate about. And that's how I stumbled onto real estate photography. And luckily, I am currently in a market that is booming right now with real estate. So as soon as I kind of got my foot in the door with the photography side, I became really intrigued with shooting videos. And at first, I was trying shooting real estate videos with my phone, which was super fun. I've actually stumbled across a video I did like 3 years ago, and it's so cringe. But we live and we learn. And from that, I've started experimenting with videos, shooting videos on a camera, and also exploring what other types of video content I could do that could also bring me closer to what I'm passionate about. And that kind of brought me to creating social content for the agents that I was already working with on their like listing photos, and even like building these whole marketing strategies for them and plugging the video that I would create for them into that. And that's very interesting from like the strategy architecture side of like the things
Right.
that you really build out the system, and then you're able to plug in your content that you create with the gear that really allows you to experiment with it. And it just being a whole really fun journey from now on.
So you started off with your phone. Did you then transition to the Fuji and then Lumix? Was that the journey?
So I've had a Fuji camera that I was using for my photography, the portrait photography and equestrian photography and everything. And I've started with that as my primary camera, and I was always shooting photos on a Fuji, but then Fuji really couldn't keep up with the video side at all. So I was doing all of the video related stuff on my phone. And then as my content grew and as my clientele also grew and started to ask more professional things of me, like shooting YouTube videos for a couple of my clients, then I started realizing I really need a really good video-centered camera. And that's how I got into Lumix. And since then, I got rid of almost all my Fuji gear and almost completely switched systems to Lumix, with an exception of a recent Fuji camera that I've added to my lineup, because I ended up realizing I really love Fuji cameras, like the way they handle things and the way that they behave when you're actually just taking photos, not making content, but just taking photos. So that's the only Fuji camera I have now. Other than that, it's all Lumix.
So you got the Lumix S5 Mark II, you started shooting on that. Then you picked up the Lumix S9. What was those first impressions when you picked up the S9? Were you thinking to yourself, I'm going to use this as a personal everyday carry camera? And when did that change to start using that for real estate work?
S9 actually had a whole another story to it, because as I was shooting with the S5 II, I was shooting a lot of content for my clients, and I was also really craving shooting something for myself. So I would take the S5 II on trips, I would do photography and videography with it. I would basically carry it with me everywhere, creating content for my channels, for Instagram mostly and YouTube. And to be honest, it's a very heavy and cumbersome camera. I also have a small rig cage in it, and combine that camera with a cage with a bunch of lenses with a heavier tripod that's able to support it. I didn't really love lugging the whole setup around with me every time I wanted to create some content. So I was in deep search for an everyday camera that would support my video needs and also my photography needs, that wasn't an iPhone, that I was able to like plop down somewhere, start recording content, get an amazing quality out of, that I was able to like connect a mic to. And I was searching for probably a year straight, trying all of the different cameras, trying a bunch of point and shoot cameras, even some from Lumix as well, that I was trying to like bring on trips and everything. And I was looking for something that really combines a smaller setup, a lighter body, still a wide variety of lenses to get me that higher level of quality of content, especially video content, something that would be able to shoot video and photo content. And this camera just didn't exist until Lumix released the S9. As soon as I saw this camera, I immediately knew this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I initially bought it as my everyday /travel /personal content creation camera. And for the longest time, I even refused to do any client shoots with it, because I thought this is the camera for my soul. I don't want to spoil it by doing work on it. So every time I would pick up the S9, that meant I'm doing personal content. And every time I would pick up the S5 II, that meant we're in like work mode. But at some point, I started trying out the S9 in more professional setups as my B cam at first, maybe as a backup camera or something. And then one day I just decided to give it a try as a full workhorse for my full day of shooting, combining real estate photos, real estate video, social video for clients, some behind the scenes content, some content for myself, because filming days are often very hectic and they involve a lot of shooting, a lot of different things, and a lot of different scenarios. And I just tried one day to allow the Lumix S9 to carry all of it with it. And it performed so well. It allowed me to capture everything I wanted. The flexibility of the using all of the lenses I'm able to use for my S5 II, the lightweight of it, the kind of small form factor, I was able to combine it with a lighter gimbal, and I was being less tired during my day shooting multiple houses a day. So since then, I've been relying more and more on the S9 and leaving my S5 II more and more at home just because it reduces fatigue. It is fun to work with. It is really reliable. It just allows me to do all of the things I can get out of my bigger camera, but in a smaller form factor.
I'm curious to hear your perspective on if you've been using features or tools like the Lumix Lab app then, especially like using the phone transfer or like the airdrop basically is how I describe it, where you can transfer photos or transfer MP4 Lite or MP4 videos directly to your phone. So what features like that or other features from the S9 have you been kind of utilizing in the real estate industry?
So I've actually, when I think about it, there's probably one feature I use the most is the MP4 Lite. I love shooting in MP4 Lite as often as I can because it reduces the file size kind of drastically when you're shooting multiple videos a day. And I think it automatically brings you to an open gate format, which allows for a lot of flexibility when I'm trying to shoot content for multiple platforms at once. And combining that with a standard color profile, so I don't have to think about color grading, the smaller file size, the open gate format, the beautiful colors straight out of camera really allows me to simplify my workflow. I haven't been using as much of the airdrop feature during my real estate shoots as much as during my like travel and everything, but I really do love the MP4 Lite.
I'm curious to hear then, you mentioned how you split it up when you first got the S9 and the S5 Mark II, how you would use the S5 II for professional work and you would use the S9 for personal work, but now it's kind of seems like it's blended a bunch. When do you specifically reach for the S5 II versus the S9 now in comparison?
So actually there are moments when I prefer my S5 II, and it's mostly when I need to hold the camera in my hands for a longer period of time without any tools attached. So when I'm not using a gimbal or a tripod, I usually reach for the S5 II because the grip is a lot more comfortable to hold. Also, when I know that I'm going to be working with a little bit larger lenses, like the 1.8 primes instead of the 18 to 40 millimeter zoom lens, I just prefer holding it in my hands. It's a bigger, chunkier piece of gear and it feels a little more balanced. But every time when I'm using it on a gimbal, I want to be able to use a lighter weight gimbal so I don't get tired as much. And whenever I'm using it on a tripod as well, I usually tend to grab the S9 so the whole setup is more lightweight.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then the follow-up to this is for the S9, you mentioned talking about like the rigs and different things like that, is what accessories or rigs do you think make the S9 real estate ready? For example, like the wide lens, the gimbal, what is kind of your like go-to kit when you're filming with the S9 for real estate?
So actually what I love about the S9 in combination with the 18 to 40 millimeter lens, real estate calls for really wide lenses, and my go-to lens is the 14 to 28 millimeter zoom lens when I go with the S5 II and when I do photography. But I've actually started preferring using the 18 to 40 mm lens for real estate video when I'm shooting with the S9 specifically, just because the 18 millimeter does give me that wider field of view that is just wide enough to showcase the whole house, but also the flexibility to zoom to the 40 millimeter and grab some detail shots without having to rebalance my gimbal and change my whole setup. It provides just enough kind of compression and creamy background to highlight the details, but also you can switch to a super wide field of view in a matter of like half a second. And that is what I really love about this particular combo when it comes to shooting, especially videos for real estate. It has become more of like a run and gun setup that I'm able to just take this tiny setup, throw it in my camera bag, and know that I'm basically ready for anything I need to shoot. So that is on the lens choice for the photos and videos. And one really essential piece of gear for real estate videography is a good gimbal. And what I again love about the S9 is that it is so lightweight that I'm able to use the lightest but still reliable gimbal that I could find, which is the DJI Mini 4 Pro. I think it's the newest one. It is so lightweight, so good, pairs so well with the S9, and this whole setup just makes me feel ready for everything that they throws at me, just because I know I'm going to be able to shoot houses, I'm going to be able to shoot kind of portrait reels with clients, basically whatever I need.
Yeah, I feel like the 18 to 40 is such a good lens. It's definitely like, especially for real estate, when you don't need something with the crazy aperture. Obviously, I think it's like an f4.5 to 5.6.
Something like that, yeah.
So yeah, it's at the point where it's like, it's not making too much of a difference, especially in the real estate world where it's like you need everything to have that bokeh and be like as blurry as possible. And you can actually have a lower f-stop and making sure you just have enough light or boosting your ISO to the dual native ISOs. I guess then kind of like this is a pivoting conversation here. This is going to start to get more into practical advice. But before diving into that, I am curious, since you've owned a Fuji camera, and you still have a Fuji camera, I am always curious to hear your perspective on recipes versus real-time LUTs, and which one do you prefer workflow-wise or just using. And it's totally cool. You can say Fuji. Is not this just because it's a Lumix podcast. It's totally cool if you prefer Fuji.
Well, I'm going to be honest, I kind of started preferring Lumix over Fuji at first. I really love the Fuji recipes, and I still do, and I think they're amazing, but I feel like they're a little bit more limited versus Lumix LUTs, just because you can fiddle with Lumix LUTs in your phone with the Lumix Lab app, which is insane to me. You can download LUTs from other creators, share LUTs with other creators a lot more easily than you do with sharing recipes from Fujifilm cameras. You can adjust the opacity of your LUTs. You can scroll between your gallery of LUTs and apply different LUTs to different scenarios. That workflow is so much more flexible on Lumix cameras versus the Fuji cameras. I think of Fuji cameras as more like your every day, just grab with you, just snap a couple of photos while you're traveling or like going about your everyday life. And for that, you don't need that much flexibility, and you can just develop basically a filter, a recipe that feels like you most of the time, and just not touch it ever after that. But with Lumix, it feels a lot more customizable, that you can really fine tune your LUTs to match whatever scenario you're shooting. So I do love the Fuji, the kind of tactile feel of the camera, but when it comes to actual colors and actual workflow, I really do prefer the Lumix.
And kind of looking a little bit more back to when you got started and you were shooting videos on your iPhone, you were like, I need a professional camera, or I need some type of professional content creator camera. Would you, knowing what you know now, recommend to your younger self or to someone who wants that better content, camera quality, but maybe they don't need the S5 II, would you prefer or recommend someone to get the S9 if they're coming from an iPhone and want some type of similar experience? Would you recommend someone getting an S9 or go for the S5 II then?
100% S9. S9 feels like such a logical step up from an iPhone, just because it is so much closer and like size and feel of it. It's basically just a little bit like the camera body itself is just a little bit bigger than an iPhone, and it's basically like if your phone had an attached lens to it. It is so intuitive. The screen is so big and it shows your footage to you so well, and just the handling of it, walking around and filming stuff handheld, just like even when I think about the S9, I often think about vlogging and just documenting your life, and that feels very similar to your iPhone experience, especially when you're going handheld, especially if you're using IBIS, because I feel like people that are shooting a lot of content on their phone, they're used to a certain level of your camera thinking a lot for yourself. So like your footage is already stabilized, your colors are already pretty good, your autofocus is great. And so S9 brings a lot of that experience, but allows you to expand yourself into more precise settings and experiment more with like different lenses and stuff. So if you don't need like very specific features that S5 II offers, 100% S9 is the logical step up.
And what tips would you give to people transitioning from a phone to a full frame system like the S9?
Just enjoy it. Honestly, hold on, I gotta think about it. Actually, I would recommend starting small. In terms of when I first transitioned from phone videography to camera videography, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos with all of the tips. I was trying all of the proper setups. I was following the, what is it called? The 180-degree shutter rule, something like that.
The 180
So
degree shutter rule.
I was following all of that, and that could easily get so overwhelming that you come back to doing videos on your phone, which is what you really don't want. And what I love about Lumix cameras is that they allow you to they allow you to ignore a couple of things that are more like professional, and they allow you to really start small and simplify your workflow that it looks. Hold on, let me think about it.
No, I mean, I kind of get where you're kind of going with this. I mean,
Yeah,
like, even on the
you can just
180 degree shutter rule, you can just turn on 180 degree shutter angle on your camera, and you don't have to think about what that rule actually means or what you have to
exactly.
do when you change your frame rates and different things like that.
And also one more thing that I really love about the Lumix cameras is their color science, in terms of you don't even have to shoot vlog to get incredible colors straight out of camera when you're just starting out. Lumix cameras do all of that for you, and they allow you to just turn them on and just shoot.
Right. And if you use the custom profiles, you can bake in 2 different LUTs to customize it. You can change your different color profile. I personally am a big fan of the natural color profile, and that's how I design all of my JPEG LUTs, or for when I'm shooting photos, is based on a natural profile. Yeah, it's a system that can, like we said in the beginning of this episode, it's a system that you can easily grow into. And it's like, it has all the tools in the kingdom that you need, but it's also can be a little overwhelming when you have them all at once. So it's a system you can grow into, and like you could start small and,
And you
like you
take them
said,
slow.
watch YouTube videos, take it slow. I'm curious to hear, as we're slowly laying the plane for this episode, how has the S9 made you more confident as a creator or business owner?
So S9 actually played a huge role in me growing as a videographer, just because it allowed me to practice the craft more. It reduces the barrier to entry, basically, into from turning your idea into a ready video. It reduces that timeline so much by being so accessible, so easy to work with. And by carrying this camera with me all of the time and trying out a bunch of different things and just filming things, it allowed me to learn so many things and advance kind of in this craft a lot quicker than if I was carrying around a different camera that was more complex and required more time of like setting up and getting into it before I could actually start shooting. So Lumix S9 almost feels like a partner that you can trust, that you can grow with. That's what I really love about this one.
Love that answer. Before we get into kind of my final question I have for you for today's conversation, where can people check you out on social media and YouTube? I think if this should work, this should be a collaboration YouTube video. So
I've
this
seen
should just
those.
already have your link already down
Okay.
below.
So, yeah, this is my channel on YouTube, and I think both on YouTube and on Instagram, I use the same username, which is sofi.khm. So you can check out those. I'd love to see you on every platform.
And then final question I have for you today, as we're wrapping up this conversation, do you think smaller cameras like the S9 are going to become more and more the future of professional content creation, especially when a lot of content creators who aren't in the videography or filmmaking or photography industry are just using their iPhones right now?
Well, yeah, I definitely think the videography field in general splits kind of into filmmaking and content creation. And content creation in itself kind of transitions from iPhone footage to a little bit more professional footage. And if smaller form factor cameras continue to be as packed with features as S9, I definitely think content creation niche is going to be filled with them and kind of taken over by them, just because they're a perfect combination of easily operable gear and really high professional quality for content creation for something like social media, YouTube, Instagram, and social content for like clients.
Sweet. Well, thank you for joining me on this episode.
Thank you too, Matt.
And if you guys are interested in seeing another episode talking about the S5 Mark II, check out that video right there. YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Till next one, guys. Peace.